We're going to put some, the names that we post for. And if anyone has, sorry, give me 1 second. Someone asked me to do something, so I lost it. Here are the names. So if everyone can say amen and write them down, and please put the names in that you need in memory of someone or in refuah shalema. And we just gave tzedakah. How we give, that's how we're going to get. So everyone give generously. And again, this class was dedicated to a very special lady and friend, Rivka Bas Yisrael Avram. May her neshama have the highest aliyah, and may she rest in peace, and may we see her so soon with the coming of Mashiach. Tonight's class, I'm personally very excited about it. We have a very special and honorable guest speaker with us tonight, Gitty Rappaport. She's a very dear friend who I got to meet through my husband, my dear husband, and we connected from the first day we met in her house. And she has the biggest heart. She has an open home. She is the kindest. She is the hostess with the mostest. She will tell you a little bit about what she does before she starts her talk, but we are so honored to have you. We were trying to get you for so long, probably over a year, and tonight was the night that was meant to be. So thank you, Gitty, for being here tonight and sharing with us your amazing journey, your amazing story, and your amazing words of inspiration. If you could unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. Wow, that was too much. So Chaya, I have to tell you, Chaya has been very persistent. When I speak of my personal journey to Chassidus. I grew up religious, but I did not grow up Chabad. And I discovered Chabad when I was a teenager many years ago. But it's, even though I've said my story many times, each time I have to do it, there's a buildup of anxiety. I never loved Zoom. So that's why also this has been always a little bit of anxiety inducing for me. Bachai has been like, Gitty, I have this class. It's an amazing class. And she's been very persistent, and her persistence have paid off. And I have to say, I'm really honored to be asked to be here tonight. I think it's so beautiful that every week people log on for inspiration, using technology to bring the light of Yiddishkeit into the world, the light of Chassidus into the world. So I'm gonna, you'll bear with me, and I'll share a little bit of what I have found in Chassidus and how it has literally transformed my life. So I grew up not far from Crown Heights. I live in Crown Heights now, but I grew up not far from Crown Heights, about 20 minutes by car, in another part of Brooklyn called Borough Park. Some of you may be familiar with it. It is a community of different Chassidus, generally not Chabad. There are some Chabad people living there. So I grew up in a completely religious home, Orthodox home, Hasidic home. I am one of 6. I have wonderful, warm parents. I went to a great school. I had a lot of great friends. And really, I shouldn't be here in Crown Heights today. Like, this shouldn't be, I should still be in Borough Park and not even know Chaya. But I started questioning a lot of what I was learning when I was growing up. So I was learning Yiddishkeit, I was learning the beauty of Yiddishkeit, but I wasn't connecting to it. And when I was about 12 or 13 years old, I want to say 13, 14 years old, I really started questioning a lot of the values and ideas that were being taught to me. And I know that there's a lot of people on tonight who are coming from different levels of observance and different levels of knowledge of Yiddishkeit. So I'm going to try to explain where I was coming from and the ideology that I was coming from and what I felt that I was missing and what I found in Chassidus. So I hope that I explain everything clearly. I'm going to try the best in the time constraint that we have. So one of the things that I learned when I was in school we learned this concept of histakel be'oraiso over alma, that when Hashem created the world, he looked into the Torah as the blueprint of the world. The Torah is the blueprint of the world. And I was learning Torah for many years. Went to a Beis Yaakov, which is a very religious school, for about 8 years. And I looked at the Torah that I was learning, and I wanted to understand how Hashem created this world by the Torah. So when we talk about a blueprint, what's a blueprint? When we talk about a blueprint of the world, we talk about, why would I make a blueprint for anything? When I'm building my house, I'll hire an architect and I'll tell that architect exactly what I want in my house, and they'll draw up the plans, and that's the blueprint, and they give that to the builder, and then the builder is going to use the blueprint to build my house. So everything that's in the blueprint is going to end up in the house. If it's in the house, it's in the blueprint. If I walk into my house and I turn to the builders and I say, where's my laundry room? And the builder says, I didn't know I was supposed to build a laundry room. There's no laundry room in the plans. Go to the architect. You were supposed to tell him to put the laundry room in. So if it's in the house, it has to be in the blueprint. So everything in this world, everything that we see, everything that we experience, everything that we come in contact with has to be in the Torah, because the Torah is the blueprint. And so I was learning Torah, and I was also beginning to learn about the world. So we were learning science, and we were learning that neurologists don't even understand exactly how the brain works. Like, the scientists are studying for thousands of years the brain, and they still don't know fully how the brain works. They're still learning. We learned that astronomers know that there are black holes out there and they don't understand. There are people who study physics and don't understand. Quantum physics just came up 40, 50 years ago, and they're still learning. So all of these concepts, these brilliant, deep things. So I'm like, oh, wow, this should all be in the Torah. Now, like I said, I grew up religious from when I was 2, 3 years old, saying Moda Ani, saying brachos, learning. I felt like, oh, I know what Yiddishkeit is about. I know what Judaism is about. And I said, what's in the Torah? Let me see if I see neurology and astrology and physics. Like, let me see if I see it in the Torah. And the way I understood the Torah, now I was 13, so I thought I knew everything, but I did, looked at my own perspective, and I said, oh, wow, what is this? So the Torah to me was 2 things. Number 1, the Torah was the history of the Jews, right? So you start in Genesis, you start in Bereshis, and it talks about the 3 fathers and the 4 mothers and the 12 Shvatim, the 12 tribes, and their whole life. And they traveled here, and they went down to Egypt, and God took them out of Egypt, and then they walked through the sea, and then they were taken to the mountain, and there was a donkey, and there was, right, the whole history of the Jews, how they went into Israel, all of that. It's the history of the Jews. And then once we get to the 3rd, 4th book of the Torah, it starts giving us the laws. So it's the history, and it's a whole bunch of rules and laws. And as a girl growing up, I really felt the laws, right? So I was taught that you have to be modest and your top button has to be closed. And I was taught that you cannot have a ham sandwich for breakfast, right? We can't mix milk and meat. And I was taught that come April, we're going to scrub our houses clean, and we're going to get rid of all the chametz, all the leavened bread in our house, and come September, we're going to move into huts. And right, so what I was learning was the history of the Jewish people and the rules that God has given us in order for us to be able to live as observant Jews. And I said, how is that histakel be'oraiso over alma? How is this the blueprint of the world? I don't see that. I don't see the greatness of the world in the Torah. So this was one question that I had. I had a lot of questions as I was sitting in class. I would start asking all these ideological questions, all these philosophical questions. My parents always told me I started thinking a little too early. So that got me into trouble. I was questioning everything from when I was very young. Now, I will tell you this, though, and this is something that I only recognized later on. I thought that all my questions were ideological and philosophical. But as I got older, I realized that in order for somebody to pick themselves up and leave their community and move and go away from the way that they were raised and the values that they were raised with, it's not always just an intellectual problem that you have. It's not always ideological or philosophical. Usually there's something emotional. Usually there's something that's really connected to who you are as a person, that touches you, that makes you feel like, oh, I'm not comfortable here. I have to leave everything that I was given, everything that was expected of me, everything that I was, my whole family was following a certain path. And I was saying, no, this path is not for me. I'm not comfortable. I'm moving off. So it wasn't just ideological and philosophical. And I only recognize this now, many years later, what was really bothering me. And I think that the thing that was bothering me was that, and when I say this, and even though I've said this so many times, every time I say this, I get like goosebumps and chills, because I can't believe that as a completely religious Hasidic girl who grew up learning Judaism from when she was a baby, right? I was raised with this. I did not identify as a Jew. So let me explain that. If you would have sat down and asked me, Gitty, describe yourself to me. Who are you? Explain yourself. You're filling out a dating profile online. Write who you are. How would you describe yourself? So I would describe myself as a girl, as a daughter, as a friend. If I would start explaining what type of person I was, I'm very passionate. I'm very outspoken. I'm a thinker. If I would discuss my interests, I love to dance. I always, whenever I had a moment, I would turn on some music and start dancing. So these are all things that I would explain who I was. And then somewhere along the way, probably on the list, 17, 18, 19, I would say, yeah, oh, I'm a Jew. Like, that's a description of me. Why am I a Jew? Because I was born Jewish. My mother's Jewish. My mother's mother is Jewish. So I'm Jewish. But it wasn't something that I felt defined me and identified. More than that, I didn't identify with it. So to give you another little perspective, when I was in school and praying, when I was home, when I didn't have school, I didn't feel inspired to pray on my own. I just prayed because I was told to pray in school. There was prayer in the morning, so we prayed, and in the afternoon. So that's when I was being Jewish. And on Yom Kippur, when I went to shul, that's when I was being Jewish. But if I hopped onto the city bus with my friends and went to King's Plaza and was shopping at the Gap, I was being Gitty. I didn't feel like, oh, I'm representing Judaism, I'm being Jewish. And if I was standing in the dressing room trying on stuff with my friends, and there was a girl in the next dressing room with her friends, an Italian girl, someone completely not Jewish. And she was, an American, whatever, who was trying on clothing in the next room. If she was the type of girl who was also outspoken and also passionate and also loved to dance, and if I would start talking to her, I might even think like, what's the difference between me and her? Maybe I have more in common with her than my Jewish friend who's very quiet and loves to sing and hates dancing. Like, maybe she's more like me. So I didn't feel like Judaism was such an integral part of my identity and my essence. I didn't connect to it. And because I didn't connect to it, a lot of what I was doing, I was just doing because I was told to do. Because I was told, if you don't do this, you're going to go to hell. I was told that how could you break the Masorah? Break the Masorah is the chain of tradition. How could you, like, for thousands and thousands of years, your grandparents, your great-grandparents have withstood the worst tests to be able to remain religious Jews. So how could you not? Look, you're living in America. It's so easy for you. But that's why I was doing it. Not because it was meaningful to me. Not because it was relevant to me, not because I was inspired by it, not because I felt like this is integral to who I am and this is how I want to express myself. So I knew everything. I knew how to keep Shabbos. I knew how to keep kosher. I knew how to dress modestly. I knew, right? I was being taught it from when I was very young. But just because I knew all the motions and all the rituals didn't mean that it was something that I felt was meaningful to me. And I wanted to be connected to it. I didn't want to just live a life of doing something because I'm being told. I wanted to understand it and I wanted to connect to it. And so I started thinking to myself, because I have older siblings, and I saw in my community, my sisters got married very young, and they started having children when they were very young, and they were raising their families. And I looked at their lives and I knew that that's what was expected of me. I knew that my parents, my community was expecting me to graduate high school, maybe do a gap year in Israel, even though generally we didn't. My family didn't do a gap year in Israel, but then find a soulmate, settle down, have a family, God willing, make potato kugel, wipe dirty noses, change dirty pampers, right? I knew that that was my path. And I looked at that, and I was, at that age, not a very maternal person. I had friends who loved their baby sisters and loved their nieces and nephews. I thought they were cute, but after 5 minutes, I'm like, you can have your kids back. I wasn't like the maternal type. And I was like, why should I spend my life doing this if this is not even what I want? Even though I grew up in a pretty insular community, I knew about Broadway. I loved to dance. And I always thought maybe if I take lessons, I'll be good enough to, end up on Broadway. Maybe I could become a dancer. Maybe I could go to school. There were a lot of different things. I loved history. Maybe I could go to college and become, I don't know, a history, but there's so many other things that I want to do rather than just get married and have a family. So I'm putting that in air quotes because my perspective now is completely different. But then at that point in my life, that was not important to me. And when I looked at that future, it kind of almost seemed very bleak. And at one point, I remember thinking to myself, well, even though this is what's expected of you, maybe you don't have to. You're going to grow up. You're going to graduate high school. You'll be old enough to move out on your own. And then you can decide if this is what you want to do. Maybe you don't have, and I remember the first time I thought that, it was such a shocking thought to me because I didn't really know anyone who was Jewish and wasn't religious. I know that sounds crazy, but the community that I grew up, all my cousins, all my friends, I went to camp, I had camp friends, everyone was religious. Nobody said, oh, I'm not being religious. At least when I was growing up, everyone was just, I'm sure there were some people who left the community, but not anyone that I knew. And I remember even the first time I thought that thought, it was just such a crazy thought in my head. It was like, what? Are you really thinking this? You get, but then I started getting comfortable with the idea. I didn't want to tell anyone about it. I was very embarrassed that I felt this way because everyone that I knew was religious and they were, and nobody asked these questions. Nobody, everyone just followed and everybody just listened and everyone was a nice, good girl. And why am I having these questions? And so I started thinking to myself, you know what? I'm going to be a nice Jewish girl on the outside. I'm going to look like everything's fine. But as soon as I'm old enough to move out, I'm going to go out. I'm going to apply to Juilliard or try to get some lessons and get into, who knows? The world is my oyster. I could go out there and make a life for myself outside. I knew that it wouldn't be easy, but that's what I was thinking. One night, I was sitting in my room and I was thinking about this. I was thinking about what my life might look like, what I want, how am I going to make this happen? It's not going to be so easy. Maybe I'm not good enough for dance school. Maybe I'm not going to get a scholarship. How am I going to support myself? I didn't think that I would be able to live in my parents' home and not be religious, even though they never told me outright, if you're not religious, you're not. They never even, it wasn't a topic of conversation because they didn't know that I wasn't thinking of being religious. They just expected me to graduate and get married. Because I wasn't telling them what was going on in my head because I was so embarrassed about it. So I was thinking about this and I remember, and to this day, I don't know why this, actually I do know. Once I started learning Chassidus, I realized that it was my inner Jewish soul was waking up. God like realized that I was going and he's like, okay, I'm going to hold on to you. But I had this thought. I remember thinking to myself, okay, so Gitty, let's say your wildest dreams come through. You're good enough to get into a dance school and you become a professional dancer and you make it. You make it onto stage, maybe not Broadway, maybe off Broadway, maybe off Broadway, but like that's what you want to do. That's what you think will bring you fulfillment, and you make it and you're there and you're dancing and you're on stage and this is your dream. What's if at that moment, Mashiach comes? And I remember thinking to myself, what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to face that? Like, you know that song? There's an Avram Fried song. This major Jewish superstar has a song. No Jew will be left behind. No one's going to, when Mashiach comes, we're all going to go to Israel. And I remember thinking, not Gitty Wolf. She's on stage, probably half naked, dancing in front of men. She's not going to Jerusalem. She's staying there in exile because she's not doing the right thing. And I remember this thought like just irritating me. And I remember thinking to myself, kind of laughing to myself and saying, why are you even thinking this? Why do you even think that this is a possibility? Why do you even think that Mashiach is going to come? Mashiach is going to come. This is how I understood Mashiach. Before I started learning Chassidus and before I learned the real purpose of Mashiach, the way that I understood Mashiach was that we come down into this world. The purpose, the reason why God put me into this world is because God is good and God wants to give good. And the ultimate goodness that he could give us is for us to bask in his glory, for us to sit in the Garden of Eden and just because that's what our souls really want. We want to bask in God's glory. But God said, I want you to earn this goodness because you know, when you give your kid a prize, then they'll just, you know, you come home one day and you're like, look what I bought you, and you give it to them and you're like, they're like, great. And they play with it for half an hour and then they're done with it. But if your child tells you that they want something and you tell them, we don't have the money for it right now, or we're going to wait a week, but if you go to bed every night on time and you brush your teeth every night, we're going to make a chart and we're going to check it off for the next 2 weeks. And then I'm going to buy you that Lego set. Believe me, that kid is going to play with that Lego set for the next 3 weeks because he earned it. He worked so hard for it. So I was told, you know, Hashem said that he wants to give us goodness. He wants us to bask in his glory, to live in the Gan Eden, to be in heaven, but he wants us to earn it. And so he put us into this world and he's telling us you have to earn your reward. And I'm telling you how you're going to earn this reward. I'm putting you into this world and I'm giving you a rule book. And I'm telling you that if you do this, if you keep Shabbos, if you keep kosher, if you light your Shabbos candles, if you wait 6 hours between meat and milk, if every time you do a positive commandment, you're getting points. And every time you do a negative commandment, you're losing points. And then you're going to come up to heaven and I'm going to look at you. There's a big scale. We always have this picture of Rosh Hashanah of this big scale. And God put all our mitzvahs on one side, all the good things that we did and all our errors. And he said, where are you? So after 70, 80, 90 years, God looks at you and God says, you're going to heaven. You're going to hell, right? So my job in this world is to earn my reward. That's how I understood what my purpose was. I'm a Jew. This is what I have to do in order to go to heaven. This is what I'm not allowed to do. Otherwise, I'm going to end up in hell. And so how does Mashiach come into play? Where's the concept of Mashiach? So we all know that if you understand it on a superficial level, it's that the world will be all good, right? There'll be no sickness, there'll be no war, there'll be no more strife, we won't have to work hard for our money. Everything is going to be, you know, when we were kids, the analogy was like candy on the trees, right? Everything is going to be easy and good. So it'll be like heaven is here on this earth. So God said, if the Jewish people collectively reach a level of goodness where they all have more merits than bad deeds, then instead of them having to die and come to heaven, it'll be like before the original sin. Heaven will be on this earth. That's what Mashiach will be. We'll all it'll just be good. There'll be no more death. There'll be no more sickness. There'll be no more war. Heaven's going to be on this earth. But we all have to earn it as a people collectively. Now, I knew who I was, and I knew all the bad things that I was doing. I knew the gossip that I said. I knew the time that I walked out of school and I opened my top 2 buttons because I was stifling, and these were all things. I knew the movies that I was watching that I wasn't supposed to be watching. And I knew, and I said, I'm not on the level to bring Mashiach. So if we all collectively have to be on this level, and especially if I'm going to be dancing on Broadway, then for sure Mashiach can't come. Me alone, even if it's just me, I'm going to be stopping Mashiach from coming. So I don't have to worry about Mashiach coming, because I don't think we're going to get there. If the generation before me and the generations, we were always told, your grandmothers, they were amazing. They used to wake up early in the morning and they would get up and they would go to the streams and wash the laundry, and they would pluck the chicken, and then finally when they would sit down and have some time to relax, you think they took out the Babysitters Club or they started watching I don't know, a movie? No, they took out their Psalms and they started, and look at your generation, because we were teenagers in America, so we were doing our thing. We weren't being the perfect Jewish girls, so our teachers had to put us in our place, so they told us. So I said, if my grandmother and my great-grandmother couldn't bring Mashiach, if that generation couldn't bring, why would Mashiach be coming now? So I don't need to worry about Mashiach. But for some reason, this thought was bothering me. And I told myself, before I leave, let me make sure that there isn't truth to this. Maybe I'm just not getting it. Maybe I just don't fully understand it. Maybe I really just need to delve a little deeper. And I kind of made a proverbial deal with God. I always had a very hard time concentrating in the prayer book, davening. But I have no problem just talking to God. Like I'll in the middle of the day, I'll just, talk to him. So I remember telling God, listen, I know that I'm having a lot of questions about Judaism. I know that I'm not feeling connected to it. I know that there are times when I even question your existence, because when I would start going down that philosophical rabbit hole, I definitely did question God's existence. There are times when I don't even know, maybe I'm not even talking to anything. I don't know. But if this is true, and if is this real, help me understand that this is what I need to be doing. I'm giving up my dreams of becoming a dancer. I'm giving up my dreams. Like you want me to live this life, help me. And so I knew that I wasn't going to wake up the next morning and there would be a parchment under my pillow. Hi, Gitty, this is God. I'm here. Judaism is correct. You better do this. Like I knew that I had to investigate and ask around a little bit, but I was still so embarrassed of my questions. And so in my own way, I started asking. I had a teacher, and I felt that she was a little bit more open-minded than my other teachers. And I started asking her these questions in like a very hidden way, like not straight up, I'm not sure I believe in God. I'm not sure I believe in Judaism. But I remember we were having a discussion about different religions. And I was saying, there's so many more Christians in the world. There's so many more Muslims in the world. Maybe like, how do we know that our small religion is the real right one, And so she came to school one day and she gave me a book. And the book was called Through the Eye of the Needle. It was put out by a organization called Partners in Torah. Partners in Torah sets up people, religious people with not religious people. Now it's probably done over Zoom, but this was many years ago. It was a phone call that you would have a scheduled time to learn with someone for about an hour a week. And whatever topic they wanted to learn, you would teach them. And what happened was that a lot of the religious people, because like myself, when you grow up doing certain things, when you grow up saying Moda'ani every morning, when you grow up keeping Shabbos, when you grow up, you don't always learn the reasons of why you're doing things. You don't always understand everything because you learn it when you're little. And when you're little, you're not being taught the ideological reasons. And so these religious people were learning with not religious people, and they were being asked ideological questions, and they had questions. They're like, oh, I don't know why I do this. I just do it. This is what I was taught. And so Partners in Torah took a very one of the first ideological books on Judaism. It was the Kuzari. It was written many years ago by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. And this was in a time when there were a lot of new ideologies coming into the world. Christianity was becoming bigger. Islam was becoming, all of these ideologies were becoming bigger, and people started having a lot of questions. And so he took the basic tenets of Judaism and he explained them in an ideological way. It's a beautiful book. It's written in question answer form. It's basically this king who is inspired by Judaism, and he calls this great rabbi in to ask him these questions, and the rabbi is giving him these answers, and it's a brilliant book. And it explains, why we believe that there was revelation, the mass revelation. What is that? None of the other religions have mass revelation. And the Jewish people, 600,000 people heard and saw God at Mount Sinai. No other religion claims that. He brings a lot of different proofs, and it's a beautiful book. She gave me this book. They distill it into a short, I think it was 70, 80 pages. I read the book. I closed the book, and I felt like that was God's sign to me. Here, I'm proving Judaism to you. Like, here it is. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay, so I got to do this, right? Because if I'm not Jewish, if I'm Jewish and I don't live a Jewish life, I'm definitely going to hell. So I got to do this. I said, you know what? It's worth it. This world, I'm going to live 70, 80, 90 years. When I die, if I go to hell, I'm in hell for eternity. But if I go to heaven, I'm in heaven for eternity. So I'll give up my enjoyment in this world, 60, 70, 80 years. I'll do what God wants me to do, and I'll earn my reward. I'll end up in heaven. I'll have that for eternity. But I have to make sure I earn that reward. I have to make sure that I'm doing everything right. I better be that good Jewish girl who turns into that good Jewish woman. Now, it's not easy being a good Jewish girl. There's a lot of rules we have to follow. It's 95 degrees outside. I'd much rather be walking around in a tank top without my wig on my head because it's hot. And right? That's just the way it is. And everything, there's a lot of things that we have to do. I have to make sure that I wait 6 hours from my coffee from my meat sandwich to have my next coffee. I'm never going to have a turkey sandwich for lunch because what do I need a coffee with milk at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? There's a lot of rules and regulations. And so I was like, but Gitty, it's worth it. Think about 60 years versus eternity. You're going to do it. And so I tried really hard. I really did. I went to school. I made sure I was wearing my longer skirt. I made sure to have concentration when I was studying, when I was praying. I made sure not to call out an answer in class and be disrespectful to the teacher. I made sure, even though I wanted to gossip a little with my friends, I didn't say anything that might be gossip, right? I was so focused on doing everything right because I better earn that reward. If I'm not going to earn it, then there's no point in living religiously. If I'm going to end up in hell anyway, I might as well not. And I remember coming home from school one day, and I was so wound up because I was trying so hard to do everything perfectly. And my brother, I have a brother who's a couple of years younger than me, and he was annoying me for some reason. I don't remember what it was. And he got me upset, and I lost my temper at him. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, it says in Pirkei Avos, which is one of the things that we learn between Pesach and Shavuos, it's the tractate that teaches us how to be a good person, just a good Jew, a good person. And it says, do you know that if you lose your temper, if you get angry at someone and you lose your temper, it's like you are an idol worshiper. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh. So I made sure to dress modestly today. I made sure to pray properly. I made sure to, not gossip. All of these. So maybe I got 20 points, or maybe I got 70 points. Maybe I came home with 160 points in God's book. But now I just lost my temper at my brother. Now I'm minus 200. Tomorrow, I'm not starting from zero. I'm starting from minus. And every day felt like such a struggle. And I remember turning to God and saying, okay, fine. Judaism is right. I believe it. And, I read this book and it made sense to me. But why me? If you would have created me not Jewish, I would have to follow 7 things not to end up in hell, right? There's 7 no-hide laws. I would have to not pull limbs off living animals and eat them. Why couldn't you I'm so bad at being a good Jewish girl. Like, if you would have created me not Jewish, I wouldn't have to do all of this. And I remember, and it's so sad that I felt that way, but that's how disconnected I was from Judaism. My brother during this time was in Israel, and he's a couple of years older than me. So I have 2 older sisters, an older brother and 2 younger brothers. I'm smack between the boys. And my brother, he has his whole other story. We don't have time for it today. Oh, wow, it's 8:38 already. Okay, so my brother started learning Chassidus. He started learning Chabad Chassidus. He ended up by a class and he started learning it, and it was very interesting to him. And so my parents got very nervous because in my parents' community, basically, if he aligned himself as Chabad, most of the girls in my community would be like, why should I marry this boy? He's not like our type, right? He's aligned. So they said, we better bring him home and try to find him someone to get married to before people find out about this. So he came home and he met a wonderful girl and he got engaged, and he was still learning Chassidus, but he was learning it very quietly. And so he came home and he saw me sitting in the house one night. I was very depressed because I was feeling like I wasn't getting anywhere. I knew that I was supposed to be doing this properly. I knew that this is what I needed in order to earn my reward, but I didn't feel like I was actually accomplishing. And so I was sitting at home. It was Purim, actually. I remember Purim, we all know Purim is fun and joyous and happy. And I remember looking at all the boys in my community would go around and dance in different houses and to raise money for tzedakah. And I remember thinking to myself, I remember even turning to God again, having one of my conversations with God and telling him, okay, fine. So you created me Jewish and I have to live this life in order to earn my reward. But like, at least create me a boy. You know, I would have been a much better Jewish boy than a Jewish girl. I would go out, I would get to dance, I'm just not like the stay-at-home type. And which in my community was more like the girls are behind the scenes and the boys get to go out. So I was sitting in the kitchen, everyone was sleeping already. My brother came home, he had come from a Purim party, and he saw me sitting there, and he looks at me and he asks me and he says, you know, Gitty, one day a year, God asks us to be happy. It's Purim. That's what he wants. That's the mitzvah on Purim, to be happy. That's such a hard mitzvah. You can't do that. You're sitting here all depressed. You can't do that. You can't be happy for God. And now I just want to remind you, I didn't tell anyone how I was feeling. Nobody knew what was going on in my head. All these questions, nobody knew. I looked like just a regular good girl following the rules, and at least trying to follow the rules. And so my brother asks me this, and for some reason that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I looked at him and I said, really? That's it? God took my soul, put it into a body and said, Gitty, do whatever you want. 60, 70, 80, 90 years, however long you're on this earth. Do me a favor. On Purim, be happy. Could you do that for me? And we're good. I said, are you kidding me? I wake up in the morning, I have to wash my hands a certain way. Before anything comes out of my mouth, I have to say certain words. I have to make sure I'm wearing proper clothing. I have to put on my shoes a certain way. I have to make sure that I'm not eating a ham sandwich. I get to school, I have to pray for 45 minutes. I said, this is all before 9:15. I already did 75 things for God. You're telling me he just wants one day a year from me? If it was one day a year, believe me, I'd have no problem being a religious Jew. And I don't even know if I believe all of this. I had all these questions. I got this book. It answered things for me, but I'm still conflicted. And everything came out. And as I'm talking to him, I'd never verbalized any of this. It was all in my head. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, like, how can I be saying such heretical things? My brother's going to freak out. He's going to wake my parents up. He's going to tell them, do you know what your daughter is saying? Like, to his credit, he stayed calm. And he said, okay, let's talk about this. And we sat that Purim night until the sun came up, literally 7-8 hours. And I remember towards the end of the conversation, a good 5-6 hours into the conversation, I looked at him and I said, wow, they were right. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, well, they were so worried about you. You had gone to Israel and you started learning Chassidus, and they were like, we don't know what he's learning. And I didn't understand. It's not like they found out you were doing drugs. It's not, you were learning something more. But I said, but now I understand why they're worried. I said, I don't know what you're learning, but this is not Judaism. And he said, what are you talking about? Explain that. Like, why do you think this is not Judaism? And I said, well, I'm sitting in school 8-9 years. I pay attention in class. One thing, I listened. I would sometimes talk too much in class, but I also listened. I said, and I learned Chumash, we learned Bible, we learned the prophets, we learned all the commentaries on it. And I never heard this concept, because that night he started talking to me about Chassidus, and he started explaining to me about the animal soul and the godly soul. He started talking to me about God's attributes, how God has wisdom and understanding and knowledge and kindness, all of these attributes that we learn, and that we have that also, and that we have 5 levels to the soul. All of these concepts, I said, I had never heard that. I had never learned any of this. I learned the history of the Jews and the rule book. How do you act in order to be a good Jew? I had never learned the ideology and the philosophy. I didn't say those words because I didn't understand even what he was saying. I said, this is so mystical. This is so deep. This is talking to me on a personal level. I said, Judaism is like, nice story. He said, a rule book. Where is this in Judaism? And he explained to me that this was Chassidus. And he explained to me that the same way that I have a body and a soul. So I have what you see when you log on. You see this person, right? With brown hair and blue eyes, and she's animated or whatever. And then once I start talking, you get to see my personality, right? So there's the physical part of me, and then there's who I really am. And I'm expressing some of that to you a little bit now. But if you don't listen to me, then you just see the physical part. So he said the same thing is with the Torah. The Torah has a physical part, which is in the history, who were the fathers? Who were the mothers? Where did they travel? What did they do? Who sold Joseph to the Egyptians? How many stops in the desert did they go to? What was the sin in the desert? Right? The history that happened physically. But then there's the behind the scenes. Why did Joseph have to go to Egypt? Why did the Jews have to go to Egypt? What was being accomplished cosmically to the Jewish nation by going down into the Egypt? Why did they have to go to the desert? What did the desert symbolize? Why did the sea have to split? What do we see in the symbolism? Not just the symbolism, what was going on in the upper worlds when the sea was being split? And the same thing with the mitzvahs. Yes, we do physical mitzvahs. Yes, we eat physical matzah. We light physical candles. But there is so much more behind that. The matzah is the negation of ego. Just to give you one small example, right? The matzah is negation of ego. The matzah is flat. There's no ego. In order for us to be redeemed, we have to give up our ego to God. We have to sublimate ourselves. And then once we're able to be pulled out of the depths of exile, then we can bring in back our personality, which is what we do during those 7 weeks. I don't know if you had a class during 7 weeks where we talk about how we can manifest our personality and bring our personality back into it in a real way. Not just coming from an egotistical place, but coming from a godly place. So once he started explaining all of this to me, I remember thinking to myself, wow, there's a whole world out there. There's a whole part of Torah that I had never been exposed to. I was just learning the history and the rule book, but there's the whole inner part, the whole inner dimension that has so much more. I remember remember we spoke about Mashiach. We spoke about how I thought that the concept, what is Mashiach? That Hashem is just going to bring goodness into this world instead of us all receiving our goodness. My purpose in this world is not just to gain my heaven. My purpose in this world is to create an abode for God in this world. This world has godliness in it, hidden. The fact that this world exists is because God had to remove himself from this world in order for creation to exist, but he is here and we don't see him. But as Jewish people, by doing a mitzvah with something physical, I am showing the world, look, there's godliness in this world. God is behind everything. God is creating this computer, this desk, this phone every single second. And by me using that for goodness and kindness, I am revealing godliness in this world. I am bringing God into the lowest world. There are all these worlds. I am bringing God into the most physical and into the lowest world. And by me doing that, I am bringing Mashiach. Why? Because God is here and I'm just revealing him by using these physical objects. And that's my purpose. It's not just about my brownie points. So when I use this computer, when I logged on today, when you logged on today, when you used this computer, when we use the Wi-Fi, whatever we're using for godliness, we're bringing God into this world. Now, I could log off tonight and use my computer for something, send a nasty email to someone, right? Not a good thing. I'm not recommending that. I'm not doing that. But nothing is going to take away from the goodness, the effect that I changed in this world. By using this physical world, I connected this physical world to the divine. I connected to the divine within myself. I connected to the divine within you. And that is infinite. When we say that God is infinite, it means he's never changing. I cannot change that. That lasts forever. The words that I am saying out of my mouth right now, these last forever. I am affecting cosmic change in this world by now by spreading Light of Chassidus. I could close the computer, turn around and say something nasty to one of my kids or whatever, and that's not good. And I'm going to have to repair my relationship with God. But that's not going to take away from the cosmic, infinite change that I created in this world. Now, think about me coming home from school 7 months before and feeling like all my work was for nothing because I lost my brownie points. And now learning that every mitzvah that I do is bringing the world to completion, bringing the world to its ultimate goodness. I'm affecting cosmic change. I'm connecting to the divine. Every second is doing that. Can you understand how that changes your whole entire day? It doesn't matter if I'm going to do an Avera, I'm going to slip up when I come home. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to do the wrong thing because right now I'm being godly and I'm revealing godliness in this world. I could come down into this world and do one godly thing and all of my 70 years will have been worth it. It's a totally different perspective. It's a totally different light. I see that we're already 8:50, Chaya. I feel like there's so much more I have to say.
Continue.
I'm going to say one more thing about Chassidus because I think that this is so important. I want to talk about what was the clincher for me, what really made me connect to my Jewish soul. We learn in Chassidus, I was always taught that God created us in his image. It was told B'Tselem Elokim, that Hashem created us in his image. But once I started learning Chassidus, I learned that it's much more than that. We're just learning in Tanya now. There's a daily study of Tanya. We're just learning. Yesterday, we learned that God blew my soul into me. When God created the world, he created the worlds with words. But when he created humans, he blew us into us. And he blew into me a Jewish soul. And that comes when we talk. I could sit there and talk for the next 3 hours. Believe me, I won't. But I could talk for 3 hours because it's coming from a more external part of me. But if I were to start blowing, try to blow up balloons, I would maybe be able to blow up 5 balloons or 7 balloons, right? I run out of breath because it's coming from an internal, much deeper within myself. When God created us, he created us with a divine soul, and within it, he blew a piece of himself. There are 5 levels of the soul, and the deepest level is Yechida. Yechida comes from the word unity, oneness. We are one with God. We're not just created in his image. It's much, much deeper than that. Within me, my essence is godliness. That's what it is. Now I get put into this world and I get a personality and I get, fears. And so I might lose sight of that godliness, right? There's a lot of people who are out there who are not connected to their soul. And even myself during the day, I might lose focus with that soul, but that soul is always there. If it wasn't there, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't exist. That I might lose sight of it. It might get covered up, but deep within myself, when I say Gitty, who is speaking? It's that Yechida, that core, that essence of godliness. And I remember my brother taught me the 5 levels of the soul, and he got to this concept of Yechida, and it resonated so much with me. And I said, that's me. I remember looking at God and saying, oh, I wish you would have created me not Jewish. And I remember thinking to myself, that's such a ridiculous thing to say. That's an absurd thing to say. Because if I wouldn't be Jewish, I wouldn't be me. The first defining factor of who I am is Jew. That's my core. That's my essence. Being a mother is secondary. Being a wife is, even now, being female is like the first thing that defines me is Jew. That can never change. That can never be taken away. That can never be, if I would cease to be Jewish, I would cease to exist. My existence is dependent on my Jewishness. This is the subatomic particles of when I get deep down behind everything is a Jew. And we learn in Tanya, also in the first chapter, Kikara velecha hadavar ma'id. I remember thinking to myself, Kikara velecha, let me just translate that quickly, is that God tells us this Torah, this way of life is so close to you. It's not across the sea. It's not across the ocean. You don't need to travel. And I remember thinking to myself, no, that's not true. Because I remember learning as a girl, don't worry, don't think that you're good. Like, just know, always doubt yourself. Don't think you're good enough. You always have to strive to be better. And I was thinking to myself, maybe when I'm adult and I'm not a teenager anymore, I'll be a good Jew. Maybe when I'm 30, maybe when I'm 60, maybe when I'm 70, I'll be a good Jew. But now I know all my flaws. I know. And I remember thinking that sullied my Jewishness. But God is telling us, no, your Jewish soul is perfect. Always is. Always will be. It's divine. It is infinite. It cannot be changed. You can pile garbage on it and you can lose sight of it. But beneath all of that is a perfect Jewish soul. And if you can push away the garbage and see that, shine a little light, that's Kikar velecha hadavar ma'od. That soul wants to do God's will. That soul, even though it's 90 degrees outside, is going to put her sheitel on because she knows this is how I truly express myself as a Jewish woman. And once I learned that, I realized it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay not to be perfect. It's okay to screw up. Your soul is perfect and you just need to reconnect. Every time you lose focus, just come right back because that is there, that is perfect, and you can always connect to it. So that's a little taste of how Chassidus transformed my life. And I don't know if we have time for a little story.
Yes.
Okay.
And we're going to have you back to hear the rest of your story.
Okay. So during COVID, so it's very interesting because once me and my brother became Chabad, my family became open to the ideas of Chabad. It took some convincing. They weren't happy in the beginning. They were like, what's wrong with this girl? Why can't she just be like everyone else? But my family is very connected to Chabad, even though they're not Chabad, but they're very connected to Chabad. And I have an older sister who lives in Muncie in upstate New York. And during COVID, he got very sick. And he was hospitalized. I'm going to shorten the story, like really, really fast. But he got sick and he was in the ICU in Westchester Hospital. And things were getting very bad. And they called my sister down basically to say goodbye. And she came down and she told him in no uncertain terms was he leaving her here. If you know my sister, you know she'll say that. She was sitting by the bed and said, "You're not leaving me." And after she left, the hospital, he stabilized. She left the hospital and she decided she's going to the Ohel, the resting place of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It was very, very late at night, early morning. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And she went to the Ohel and she was crying her eyes out. And she left the room, the actual Ohel, and she went to the place where the video was playing. And as she's watching the video, 2 other women walk into the room. And they start talking, because who else is there at 2 o'clock in the morning? And she says, you know, I'm here because I'm asking for a blessing for my husband. He's really very, very sick. And this was a mother and a daughter. And they turned to my sister and she said, my husband, and this girl said, my father is also very, very sick in the hospital. And they're commiserating and they're standing there and they're watching this video. And in the video, the Rebbe, I don't know exactly what the clip is, but the Rebbe gives a bracha for a complete refuah shalema, which means a speedy and complete recovery, physical recovery to somebody, in however he was saying it. And the cameraman is first focused on the Rebbe, but then turns around and shows the crowd. And all of a sudden, my sister hears this woman gasp. First, my sister was like, oh, wow, I feel like this is a message from the Rebbe that she's giving a bracha that he's going to be better, that he's going to get better. But this woman is like gasping and she says, oh my gosh, that's my husband sitting in the crowd. So in that video, many years ago, the Rebbe said, you know, whoever he was talking to should have a complete speedy recovery. But this man who was in the hospital, whose wife was standing at the Ohel, was in that room hearing from the Rebbe 20, 30 years ago that there should be a refuah, there should be healing. And so they hugged and they were like, this is a sign that they're going to be better. Even though I'm telling you, the doctor said, there's no way your husband is coming out of this. I don't know what the doctors told this other woman, but my brother-in-law, they said, this is it. He's not coming out. And so they said, they hugged each other and they exchanged phone numbers, or they tried to exchange. Actually, my sister lost the number and all the things. She called me up to find out who it is. They said, we're going to come back and we're going to celebrate our husbands coming out of the hospital together. My sister went home. She actually had, her husband is Herzog. His name is Eli Herzog, and he's involved in Kedem Winery, which is a very big kosher winery. And she got a phone call the next day from somebody telling her, I don't know if you know this, because her husband was a very modest man. He said, your husband used to go with his father to bring wine to the Rebbe to give kosher bracha, which the Rebbe used to give out blessing, little wines of, and it would signify blessings to the people who would get it. And he said, people have saved the wine that the Rebbe used to give. I have kosher bracha, and I'm telling you, go to the Rebbe and tell the Rebbe, my husband used to come and bring you the wine. You have to give us a blessing. You have to give. So my sister took the kosher bracha. She actually dropped it off in the hospital. She was hoping that they would be able to somehow get it into him. So a couple of weeks later, they moved my brother-in-law out of the ICU. And then 2 weeks later, he was released from the hospital. He was sent to rehab. And a couple of weeks later, he was in the ICU for 6 weeks. I don't know if you know anyone during COVID, very few people were in the hospital. Like usually if you were in the ICU, didn't unfortunately last that long. He was in the ICU for 6 weeks. He came out and he is working. He's back at work at the winery today. The crazy story is my sister forgot. She misplaced the number of this woman. And she was always thinking to herself, I wonder what happened to this woman and this girl, because I received the blessing and my husband got better. I wonder what happened to this man. And she called me up and she gave me a name. And she said, there's somebody in Crown Heights whose husband was very sick. Can you find out? But she gave me the wrong name. She mixed up the name. She was so overwhelmed that night. She mixed up, and I said, I don't know who you're talking about. I don't know anyone of that name. So she never connected. A couple of weeks later, my brother-in-law wasn't completely better, but he was back home. And she said, I have to go to the Rebbe. Late at night, one night on a Saturday night, Matzai Shabbos, she woke up and she said, I have to go thank the Rebbe. I never went to thank the Rebbe. My husband's home. He's still on his way to recovery, but I have to go thank the Rebbe. So she got into the car. She drove an hour and a half into Queens, and she came to the aisle. It was, again, 1:30 in the morning, and she's standing there and she's thanking the Rebbe. And all of a sudden she hears a shriek. And the person says, Dubairi. And she turns around and she sees this girl, the daughter of this man. And she says, how's your husband? Please tell me your husband's okay. And she said, yes, he's home. And she said, how's your father? Please tell me your father's okay. She said, I know your niece because she knows my daughter. And I kept on wanting to ask her about your brother-in-law. But if you remember, March, April 2020, so many people were dying. It was like scary to even ask about someone because you were so worried about hearing bad news. She said, I kept on thinking of texting your niece and asking about your husband, but I was so worried that they would give me bad news that I never asked. She said, but yes, my father is home. And they were hugging and kissing there. And she says, look at this. She said, why are you here tonight? She said, well, I wasn't supposed to come, but I went to a friend for Shabbos. And as I was driving home, I said, oh, I'm not far from the aisle. I never went to thank the Rebbe. And so I'm coming to thank the Rebbe. And my sister said, me too. It's late on Motzei Shabbos. And I just had this feeling of, I have to come thank the Rebbe. And they both ended up there thanking the Rebbe. And her father is alive and well, and my brother-in-law is alive and well. So that's one of the beautiful Rebbe stories that my family has that I'm sharing with you. So thank you so much for letting me share a little bit about my journey. I hope it was clear. There's a lot of information. And thank you, Chaya, for inviting me.
Gitty, that was amazing. That story was wow. I know that family from Crown Heights. I stayed up nights coordinating Tehillim for him, and I told God, and I told the Rebbe, and I told my grandmother, he cannot die. This man is a tzaddik. He cannot die. And every time I see him, I say, I want to hug you. I know I can't hug you, but I just need a blessing from you. You're a miracle. And I'm so happy. I didn't know you're part of the story, but we should really just have the ultimate Mashiach, and it's a real live miracle. So special. Thanks for your story. We're going to need a sequel. Gitty's brother is actually a very dear friend of my husband's, and as well from two different angles. And his name is Rabbi Wolf. So Google him on YouTube. He has a lot of talks about
Mayan.com, M-A-A-Y. I don't know how to go on the chat. I'm very bad in technology. I'm very proud of myself.
So tell me what it is, and I'll put it. What's the website?
Mayan.com. I'm almost sure it's Mayan.com. M-A-A-Y-O-N. I'm going to just make sure. He has a ton of classes online, and it's incredible.
Okay, he is the real deal. He really is. Really good guy. His wife.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's MAYON-YOSROEL.com, MayanYisrael.com. But if you put in Mayan, it will come up.
Okay.
And guys, hundreds of.
I guarantee you'll enjoy it. He's really a very special human who is so sincere. Gitty, we're going to need the sequel of your story because we have so many questions, but it's a really, the program, we need to end it soon, but we'll have you again. So everyone, if you want to just raise your hand in the inbox, if you want Gitty to come back so she can see before we conclude with a video. Let's see. Or you could put your thumbs up. I think that everyone wants you back. I see hands raised. Wow, this is big. So if everyone can write in the inbox where you're all from, that would be really cool. We're going to conclude with a video. So thank you, Bluma, for sharing. She's going to share. So this is a video that came up. I hope you'll be inspired like I was. Coming on. Hold on one second. Give us one moment. So Gitty, you could talk in the meantime if you'd like until the video.
Oh, I think
I was born in New York City. I grew up in the 5 towns. I'm one of those originals. My parents did belong to an Orthodox shul. They actually founded an Orthodox shul, Rabbi Young Rice's shul in Northwood Mere. I wasn't lucky enough to go to yeshiva, but I went to a Hebrew school. But I always loved everything to do with Judaism. I went to public school. I went to Columbia. I have a degree in English. And I graduated college in 1982, and I went to Israel soon after. I was working at the time for Bank Leumi in the advertising department in Tel Aviv. I was there working, living, and in 1984, I met my husband in a business meeting. He wasn't from at all, and he actually asked me out for a Friday night, which is funny, and I said no. But he continued to pursue me and said, I'll do whatever it takes to go out with you. I'll keep Shabbos, I'll learn, I'll do. And he did. And 2.5 years later, we got married in 1986. And we spent 5 years, more than 5 years, trying to have children. And we did all kinds of things. We went to doctors. We went to France to drink special water that we said would be the cure. And nothing worked, and no doctors had any advice for us because there was nothing wrong. Everything was fine. We had a friend, Judah Wernick, who suggested we go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe to ask for a bracha. I really didn't want to. I resisted a lot in the beginning. I said, I really don't believe in miracle workers or people. I didn't want to go. And he kept telling me, you have to go, you have to go, you have to go. It was over a period of time. It wasn't just like in one day. And we eventually said, fine.
Now, as a good husband, I said, okay, let's go. Judah promised us that we won't stay online, and he's going to go with us. And we went Sunday to the Rebbe.
It was all very unusual to me. There were people waiting online outside. There were lines all over the place. And I'd never seen anything like that before. And he explained to us that his counsel from camp, Rabbi Benjaminson, was going to take us. That was how we got to go in. And we went through some kind of side door, some maze, I don't know. But all of a sudden, we were online. I didn't cover my hair at the time. All of a sudden, somebody threw a tichel on my head. And the next thing I knew, we were in front of the Rebbe.
Mr. and Mrs. Daphne.
In the future, that your giver you became pregnant. The not to bless you, and your wife became pregnant.
He gave me $1 and he said, you should give this to tzedakah when you become pregnant. And then he gave me another $1, and he also gave my husband $2. And I walked out just very, very happy, completely confident that in the near future I was going to have children. 7 months later, we were at the bris of one of the Wernick's children. They had given birth to triplets, 2 boys and a girl. And we carried the baby boy in. And then Rabbi Benjaminson suggested, 7 months have passed, you should go back to the Rebbe. So we went back after the bris to the Rebbe that Sunday.
I want to ask you for bracha children.
You're going to bless you, have good news. If you observe to the law of family purity, I'm going to bless you to have good news.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So immediately after that, we went straight down to the Chanut Sfarim, because the Rebbe said, you should learn the Taharat HaMishpacha. So we went across the street to the Sfarim store, and we choose a book that is half Hebrew, half English. I remember that we can learn at night, and every night we were learning it together. I was learning Hebrew, and she was learning in English.
The next month, I found out that I was pregnant with triplets. While we were pregnant, and we were going for regular checkups, the doctor was concerned that the girl had a problem with her heart. And they wanted to do a Doppler study in vitro and an ultrasound. At the same time, I called Dvori and I said, we're going for this test. And actually, she sent Ari Halberstam, Zichron Levacha, with a zetela to the Rebbe that read to the Rebbe. And Rabbi Groner called me that night and said, the Rebbe said, everything's fine. Don't worry. There's nothing to do. We still did the ultrasound. And for an hour and a half, they brought in an expert from Columbia Presbyterian who does fetal cardiac ultrasounds, and there was nothing at all. And almost 9 months exactly to the day, we were blessed with triplets. Much later, after the triplets were born, it's maybe 6 years, they were about 5 or 6 years old. And I had repeated miscarriages, and I still wanted more children. And I had a blood test that was done that hadn't been done previously that showed that I had something in my blood that's called antiphospholipid antibodies, which means that your blood forms clots. So I was pregnant a lot, but I was losing the pregnancies. The triplets are an entire miracle. How I was able to sustain that pregnancy. When I got pregnant again successfully with our daughter Golda, I was taking a baby aspirin every day, like people do for the heart, to keep the blood flowing. But with the triplets, I didn't. And they still, miraculously, I was able to keep that pregnancy and give birth to 3 healthy children.
Wow, thank you for sharing that beautiful video that I found. It came up by chance, and I sent it to my dear friend Shane D, and I asked her what she thinks about this video, and she said, I actually know them. So small world, such a beautiful blessing. It's not by chance. I'm really so honored, Gitty, that you shared tonight. If you want to unmute yourself and just give a takeaway for those that want to explore how to get connected to Chassidus if they don't have it in their life, or they want to have more Chassidus and light in their life. I would love for you to share that. And if you want to just, whatever you want to share as a takeaway, and we're so lucky we had you, and it looks like we're going to have you back.
So I think for me, when I speak, I'm not just speaking, I speak to myself as well, because I have to reignite the passion in myself, because you go through life and, you know, we're busy. I thank God I'm married with 6 kids, and, you know, I'm a busy mom, and I sometimes lose sight of my soul. I get busy with what are they wearing and what are they eating, and I have to make a doctor's appointment, and, you know, so I realize that it's not just about learning this, but it's keeping the learning going on. And I find, and I didn't do this always. I learned Chassidus and I was like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And then I married a Lubavitcher and I moved to Crown Heights, and I was like, and that was like my rebellion. And then I like was here, and then I got married and started having kids. And I actually love being a mom. I know, despite what I said before. And I think that if I wouldn't have found Chassidus and wouldn't have ended up getting married and having children, I would have never been able to experience that blessing. So like I owe my family to Chassidus also, because if I would have, you know, not found Chassidus, I don't think that I would have really been able to, you know, manifest myself as a mother. So thank you for that. Like I have to thank Hashem for that also. But I think that for me, at one point, I realized that it's not just that you learned it and now you know, like whatever you know, but you need to bring that inspiration into your life every single day. That's what it is, because we live in such a fast-paced world. We live in a world where our attention is being drawn in so many different directions all the time, that if we don't stop to think about our soul, it's so easy to forget about it. And then we just go through life by rote. We just go through life doing, you know, what we need to do without connecting to ourselves, without connecting to our children, to our spouses, to our friends on that deeper soul level. And so for me, and this was something that I had to learn over time, I realized that I have to take a few moments every day. And some people, they just need to pray in the morning. Like they need to pray and that's their connection. I need to learn. I need to learn something every single day. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe instituted something called Chitas, and it was something that I didn't do, and that's the daily study of little portion of Chumash, the daily portion of the Bible, the daily portion of Chassidus, which is the Tanya, and a little bit of Psalms. You say some Psalms. And I was very resistant to doing that for many years because I found that if I didn't take that time every single day, sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's 25 minutes to finish the portion of the day. I felt that if I dropped out, if I got busy one day and I lost one day, I felt like, oh, I lost the whole thing. You get that theme in my life. I'm very much all or nothing. So a couple of years ago, I think about 2-3 years ago, I joined a group, a WhatsApp group. And every day we all post when we finish our daily chitas, and it's just like a little gentle reminder that we should do our things. I think it's important. There's so many, like Chabad.org has, you could sign up and they send to your inbox, like, you know, the daily portion, or even the Rebbe did something called Hayom Yom, which every day he gives like just a little inspiration. And I feel that even if you just take 3, 4, 5 minutes in the morning to think, am I just a human being in a body who needs to feed my body, who needs to go to work, or am I more than that? And it doesn't need to be like this huge philosophical thing. But if we take time to say some Psalms, to learn a little bit of Torah, to learn a little bit, I mean, especially Tanya for me, just brings that little bit of inspiration, and my whole day is different. My whole entire day is different. I'm just connecting to my children, connecting to my friends, connecting to my coworkers. I'm coming from a different place. I'm not coming from just a human being. I'm coming from a soul, and I'm talking to a soul, because it just reminds me that every morning when I take that time. So I think that whatever it is in your life that you could do, but I think for me especially, it's the learning, a little bit of inspiration. 5 minutes in the morning just changes your life.
So Gitty, someone asked about which Tanya you recommend to buy, because there's so many of them.
Yes.
Which one are you?
I'm going to get it for you. 1 second.
Okay. And then if anyone has any questions, I want to just, before she comes back, I just got an inspiration to make a group and post the daily chitas in English on a WhatsApp group. So if anyone wants to join it, please WhatsApp me. Gitty, you inspired.
Also, I do want to say that there is Chabad.org. Besides Chabad.org, there is a daily study app. So I find it very convenient. I actually was driving in upstate. I came into the city to pick my son from camp. So I drove in, and I'm able to listen to the Tanya, listen to the Chumash, and okay, the Psalms I say, but even listen to it. I try to say it also, but even just listen. It's so easy because it's on your phone. It's like just an app on the phone, and every single day it refreshes that day. And you could just listen to it. And it's like, you know, it's so crazy what we have in our lives nowadays that we have this, I don't know if you could see it, it's this daily study app right here from Chabad.org. And like, it's so easy to learn nowadays because we have everything at our fingertips, you know? Okay, so Tanya, I just want to say this just quickly. Lessons in Tanya is what I originally learned from. My first original lessons in Tanya is all marked up with highlighter and pencils and questions. I don't even know if it's legible anymore. A couple of years ago, Rabbi Chaim Miller wrote, so if you want to study Tanya in depth, Tanya every day is more, you just learn it. But if you want to study Tanya in depth, this is an incredibly clear book. It's so, the English and the Hebrew flow seamlessly. He explains everything so well. There's an index in the back if you want to say, you know, what is God's attribute of kindness? And he has the index of it. It's incredible. I cannot recommend this book enough if you want to study it in depth. This is it. And I will say that until today, even though Baruch Hashem, thank God, I've had the opportunity to learn a lot of Chassidus. I still have a lot more to learn, but through my brother, there's a lot of talks and there's nothing like the Tanya. The Tanya is, I remember when I learned it as a girl, as a 16-year-old girl, thinking to myself, how does the Alter Rebbe, who lived 300 years ago, understand me in the 1990s, a 14-year-old girl? Because it's the key, it's like a psychology book. It's the key to our souls. I felt like the Alter Rebbe was explaining all those questions that I had about myself. Remember I said that I didn't feel connected to Yiddishkeit? Here the Alter Rebbe was showing me, this is who you are. This is the Jewish girl. And I really feel like the Tanya, does that. So this book, if you're a visual learner and you could read a book, then I highly recommend. It's called Practical Tanya, the Practical Tanya. This one is the book for in-betweeners. But then if you're a visual or an audio learner, Chabad.org also has amazing classes. Rabbi Gordon gives classes on Chabad.org. Rabbi Shais Taub, Soul Words is a podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can find him. He teaches Tanya. I think every single person can benefit from learning Tanya.
Also, Vivian Perez, a dear friend of ours that spoke in our class, Vivian Perez gives a Wednesday Tanya class at 2:00 on Zoom, also in person in Florida. So if anyone would like to join that class, please private message me and I'll add you to her weekly class. Gitty, that was so great and so insightful. If anyone wants to add anything, please do. But I want to create a group on WhatsApp and post the daily chitas with Rabbi Gordon, who I listen to, and then it will be like a reminder to say it. Also, if you check my status every day, I post the daily Hayom Yom, also audio, in memory of my two friends, Hindalea Bas Menachem Mendel and Chana Bas Aaron Leib, that passed away too young. So we post it every day on my status on WhatsApp. Just check it out and you can just click on it. You'll get to listen to audio. There's two different versions of it, if you'd like, with two different rabbis. So please do that for their neshamas. It will mean a lot to me and a lot to them because they can't learn anymore, but we can do it in their honor. But it's literally like daily snippets that just like, it's like a pick me up. It just makes sense, like the daily Hayom Yom. So if you'd like to be part of it, just check my WhatsApp. And Gitty, we hope to have you again.
I'm sorry. I also would just like to say I'm on my son's computer. Oh, okay. I didn't know if anybody wrote anything to me or direct messaged me because I don't know how to check the chat. I'm so embarrassed to say this. I'm very bad. Like my phone, I know inside out. Computers, I'm not good at. So I just see now that I could scroll down and see everybody's comments. So if I didn't respond to you, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's just because I didn't see it, but I will read all the comments now. So if anybody did write something, and then if I have any answers or anything, I will send the message to Chaya so she can post it. I'm sorry that I didn't respond to anyone if they did write to me.
And Gitty, thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for wanting to become Chabad, because then we would never know each other. But I'm also so thankful for all my amazing friends that come on here weekly from all different backgrounds. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where we're from because we're all the same. We're all one. So we're like a puzzle piece coming together every week. And it's really special. So thank you. And have a blessed night, everyone. And looking forward to our next week's speaker. Mrs. Rifki Slunim is going to be joining us. So it's really,
Wow.
yeah, it's really exciting. We've been working on that for like a very long time too. So thank God, we're very blessed and looking forward to seeing you all next week. And thank you for tuning in, everybody. And if you like this class, please share it with a friend who doesn't learn Torah and doesn't come on. And just remember, be the reason why someone smiles today. So good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night. Laila Tov. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you all for coming.